Hello and welcome everyone to Ruslan's Bortnik YouTube channel in English. And here's another episode of series that will discuss the latest updates about Ukraine and around Ukraine. If you're looking for pragmatic and rational analysis of the situation in Ukraine, you've got to the right channel. I'm excited to be here again with my colleagues Ruslan Bortnik, the director of Ukrainian Institute of Politics, and Marina Cherenkova, a political observer. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Hello, James. Thank you for the invitation.
Colleagues,
thank you for having us.
Colleagues, if we may, let's start with the mineral deal that was signed lately between the US and Ukraine. There was a lot of conversation before that deal was signed. There was a lot of talks during the process of signing the deal. What do we have right now at the moment? What kind of deal finally was signed? Who's the winner? Who's the loser? Or maybe it's a win-win? And what actually stands behind that deal? Because we have talked previously a long time ago that the maps of the minerals in Ukraine are outdated. They're from the Soviet Union era. If they were commercially profitable, businessmen in Ukraine would work with them a long time ago, and so on and so forth. So if we can break it down from the political perspective and from the practical business perspective, what stands behind that deal? Ruslan, if we may start with you, if you can give us a little bit of a general observation and if there are any points that I have missed when I was presenting that topic.
Okay, James, thank you for this approach. And there are two problems with this mineral deal. The first problem, and it's very bright shown in the last article of Washington Post, it's a technical problem of fulfilling for this deal. We are talking about estimation of Ukrainian mineral resources, which were made in Soviet era, which were made this different kind of estimations of these resources, storages of your Ukrainian minerals, rares, and so on, which were made 15, even 17, 50, even 70 years ago. So no one knows how much does Ukraine have such minerals, such resources, and so on. Moreover, we have another technical problem with this. We are not able to take these mineral resources in situation of the war. When we have a broken logistic, when we have a everyday air alarm and significant dangers for any enterprise to be destroyed by the airstrikes. Moreover, we need a lot of energy to work with rares, for example. We need because this process of excluding these rares from different materials takes a lot of energy. Moreover, we need financing. We need money to develop these enterprises, to develop these mines, and we are saying about hundreds of billions of United States dollars. So technically, I think, to be honest, in this situation, it's almost impossible to develop this project on the land, on the ground, in the situation of the war, and in general, in the nearest years in Ukraine after even the war it will be stopped. And the second biggest problem, it's a problem of that we still don't know exactly the terms and conditions of this mineral deal. We have three agreements: the general agreement on this mineral deal between the Ukrainian and the United States government. It's a good agreement without a lot of very concrete things, and so without details and so on. It's a general agreement, and we have this agreement is published, and we have two other agreements, very detailed agreements, which are describing for us the balances between the sides, between Ukraine and the United States, which are describing the money, the beneficiaries, the judicial and technical amendments to fulfill this agreement, so which are describing details. But this agreement, this very detailed agreement, are not published. They are still hidden. And so we are discussing about the signed agreement, but this agreement is not ratified by Ukrainian parliament still. But we don't know still the very important details of this agreement, and these details may be very important because I'm still looking at a very different approach and very different comments on the side of this agreement. For example, the official White House representative said that United States are considering this agreement like a tool how to back the previous time sent to Ukraine aid and financial support and so on. They made a check for Ukraine, but at the same time, from Ukrainian side, there are a lot of official voices which are saying that this agreement will be suited only for the future cooperation, not with the past support, past aid, and so on. So a lot of contradictions still are between the sides. And I think maybe it's a problem of political management, and maybe it's a problem of that hidden agreements, and maybe it's a problem of a different estimation and consideration of the articles of this agreement, and it also could lead sides to the broke during the process of fulfilling this agreement. So a lot of unpredictable and still a lot of the things we don't know, still a huge hidden part of this communication between the United States and Ukraine.
Before we move forward, friends, please subscribe and like our video, and let us know in the comments if you like and appreciate that analysis that we provide in terms of what is happening in Ukraine and around Ukraine. Colleagues, I can't help myself, but when I'm thinking about that mineral deal and just in general, all the speculation, all the political speculation that have happened between President Trump and President Zelensky and between the two nations as a whole, is that it's more political than practical. What I mean by that is, to me, the way that United States behaves is an indicator that Trump's administration tries to show, hey, we're not losers. We're not going to behave the same way that President Biden was behaving. We're not just going to give checks to Ukraine without any grounds that we can make our money back or there's any political, practical business cooperation. So we just need to create that kind of like informative speculation that we're not going to just give that money for free now. And they came up with that idea of mineral deal, when in practice, it's not really guarantees that the United States is going to make their money back, if they will at all. And I'm saying this also because if that's the case, why Ukraine and President Zelensky and the government was pushing out from that deal so much? If, whatever you sign or whatever that deal is going to look like, it's not really going to cooperate practically. So what was the problem to pass that ball to Trump and Trump's administration and be like, yeah, we'll sign, we'll cooperate, just let's expand our cooperation and thank you for all the help and all the aid? Or I'm missing something here? Marina, what do you think? Do you agree with my statement, or I'm missing here something, or there is a completely different game?
No, I would totally agree with you, James, and I just would like to elaborate a bit on Ruslan's comments. Just imagine that the process of ratification from the Ukrainian side is even now unclear, when Ruslan has mentioned earlier that neither Ukrainians nor public haven't seen the text of the documents. That's the one part of the problem. The second part of the problem is 360, or I just don't remember how many members of parliament in Ukraine are still working in the parliament, around 350, right, Ruslan?
No, around 400.
Okay,
a few less than 400.
Okay, 400 senators in comparison with the United States, right, had no chance to read the text of that agreement, but they are to ratify that. Don't you think something is very wrong in that construction?
Definitely suspicious.
It is. And at the same time, we have some very weird publications in the respectful media, but still unclear publications, texts, conclusions. From my perspective, we have just to recognize there are too many blind spots, and we are not able to analyze something really seriously. However, historically, the United States has a very aggressive, pragmatic, and pushy foreign policy. And from that perspective, I assume that in your construction win-win, it will be United States of America.
But if it will be United States, how they're going to have this win on their side? Because correctly, if I'm wrong, it's so much easier for them to get minerals and other natural resources from countries and regions close by. For example, from South America, from Canada, they have way cheaper and way easier ways to buy and receive those mineral resources. And just, in general, like we said earlier, the minerals that Ukraine has right now, the maps of these minerals are outdated unless there is some information that we don't have, that we personally don't have access to. And there are more minerals that we know publicly that United States is after. Or is just, again, I'll get back to my previous point, that is just a political game to show to the nation that we are winners. Look, this is a win-lose deal, win for the US, but it's just publicly and informatively that way. But in practice, they would just hope that everybody's going to forget about that deal in 5-10 years and something different is going to come up.
And I will just continue. What if, James, it's not only about mineral deals? What if it is about infrastructure, which is in Ukraine is still quite attractive? And I'm talking about seaports. I'm talking about the very serious open cost productions. What if something which are not public at all are absolutely different from minerals?
Yeah,
we do
because they have
Yep.
added, I'll just want to add 2 cents into this. And Ruslan, correct me if I'm wrong, but from what I have read publicly, they have added the transition of gas into that deal. That means that the income from that logistical hub that Ukraine is going to play in the future, when the conflict will end, will also generate money that United States want to have a part in. Is that correct?
No one knows. And Ukrainian government rejects such statements. Ukrainian government is saying that there is no anything about the infrastructure, but I've read personally that agreement, the general agreement, and there is a article that the main methods of this agreement is creation of a special fund of inventions and restoration of Ukraine. And one of the biggest part of the future interests of this fund is also infrastructure, which is necessary to fulfillment of this deal. So if we take into account this point, we clearly understand that the United States may have a right to use or to develop infrastructure which could be very necessary for this deal. It could be energy infrastructure, it could be seaports, for example, it could be railway, everything what we need to exclude and to transfer their rares for another mineral resources and everything. So it's not so easy. But I want to elaborate, colleagues, your points about the goal of this deal. Of course, there is a political goal. Of course, there is. We are talking about that to look better than the previous administration, to look better than the Biden's administration. Of course, there is an informational goal. Look, we are guys which are backing home our monies, which were unnecessary wasted in previous administration. But there are also geopolitical goals. I think United States and the Trump administration clearly understands that the economical benefits from this deal are very unpredictable and are very and they are unsure these benefits. They are looking otherwise they are looking the instruments and methods how to create a dependence or even addictions between United States and Ukraine. It is very necessary if we are looking on this process like a preparation process, preliminary process before the negotiation with Russia about the future of Ukraine. And Secretary of Treasury of United States, Bessent, clearly said that this deal is very important for the peaceful making process, for the future peaceful deal. So it's a creating of this dependence or addiction, which should show for Russia that United States has a boots on the ground, not in military, but in political and economical way. United States is a main player in this situation because United States is taking control over Ukrainian resources and logistic, and United States is a player in this game. So they need to negotiate about the future of Ukraine, how to divide this influence between two big geopolitical players. Also, this deal means that European Union, and Great Britain are out of this process. Because I may remind you that European Union said a month ago that this deal is not suits to the agreement between Ukraine and Europe about association and so on. And Great Britain also made a deal with Ukraine 100 years deal, as I remember it called. And there are a lot of rumors that there also were some parts about Ukrainian mineral resources. So the United States, through this deal, I think, are preparing the next stage of negotiation with Russia, and they are kicking off even from this process Europe and Great Britain, which were trying to make some obstacles in negotiation process for Trump last months.
Marina, speaking of negotiations between the United States and Russia, US have announced that they step back from the peace talks, saying it won't mediate between Russia and Ukraine. And I think that happened right after they have signed the deal. What do they mean? And what do they mean by like stepping back? They're not going to directly participate. They're not going to initiate these talks. Because in my opinion, they haven't even really started the negotiations and the mediation, if you know what I mean. Like they've started mediating and negotiating with Russians about, Russia-US relationship, but they haven't really negotiated a whole lot between Russia and Ukraine. What do you think?
I think that I would start from the definition of mediator, and mediator is a side which is neutral to both conflict sides, and the United States is not that part.
Are not quite fitting into that.
No, not at all, because it's definitely they were from the very beginning as country,
a participating side.
Yep, totally participating side. My personal opinion is that every time when states think that they are not moving fast enough or results are not extremely satisfactory from their perspective, they try a bit to blackmail, to manipulate. And every time they do that, so we can read in news that they are living. So that's it, we're living. That's it, we're living. And after that, some not breakthroughs, but some positive steps are observed by me, for instance. But I don't know, Ruslan, what do you think?
What do you mean exactly?
I mean, why would United States repeat that they're living that negotiation process and they would like to step away and they would push Russia and Ukraine to negotiate peace deal directly?
I think I will add into that question also, Ruslan, if you can elaborate on that as well. Is there a historical example how fighting nations are getting into negotiations unless somebody is capitulating or like completely losing? It's really hard to have a direct negotiation between the fighting parts, like between like the fighting nations. Or we have a lot of historical examples how the fighting nations are all of a sudden starting the negotiations.
You know, of course, it's very hard for politicians to start such kind of negotiations, trade negotiations, after such a huge losses and after such a lot of suffers and so on. Of course, it's very hard for them. But every war, almost every war in the world, was ended by the trade negotiations. Sometimes it happened after the capitulation. Sometimes it happened during the draw. Sometimes it happened in the time of huge exhaustion of the sides. But trade negotiations, in any case, are very necessary. Of course, if you have such a complicated conflict like Ukrainian-Russian conflict, with a huge geopolitical influence and which many international participants in this conflict. If from the both sides, we see a Rammstein, a coalition on the Ukrainian side, more than 60 countries which are supporting Ukraine, which are sending weapons, which are sending money and so on. We also see allies from Russian side. Some of them, for example, North Korea, are fighting with Russia together, even against Ukraine. So it's a very complicated conflict. And for me, it's an open question in which stage, in what time we need to start this trade negotiation between Ukraine and Russia. But I'm sure it has to be if we are willing to achieve a successful resolution of this conflict. I think there may be because every mediator has its own price. Every mediator brings to the negotiation process his own interests, and every mediator makes this negotiation process not easier also, but also more complicated because its own interest. We need to understand it. I think the problem with the Minsk agreement and Minsk negotiation process, which continued in Ukraine during 2014-2022, was also with a big amount of mediators and contradictions of the interests of mediators inside of this process. So we need to be very attentive and very careful with the mediators, with their interests and goals. There is no holy mediators which are willing just to stop the war and to bring the sides to the peace. Every time mediators bring their interests to the negotiation. We need to remember it.
I have to ask that question. Does that mean that a more effective progressive negotiations will be if Ukraine will go negotiate directly with Russia?
I think in the second stage of negotiation, we exactly need this dialogue. But it's very hard for politicians because they are losing face.
Because it's not popular.
and it's not popular. And moreover, all the time during the war, politicians were trying to mobilize their society, and for mobilization, for such kind of informational political mobilization, they used a lot of huge, strange, very aggressive words against each other. They humiliated. They just drowned his enemy like animal, and so on. For them, it's very personally hard to start this negotiation after this, and it means also some kind of decline of his previous words and losing the face in the eyes of passionate part of society inside your country.
Something else that I have noticed right after Ukraine and US have signed the deal, and Marina, I think you can correct me because you're good at fact checking, is that US, Trump's administration, for the first time have provided Ukraine a new aid package that was not approved by Biden's administration, because most of the aid that was coming for the past months to Ukraine was from previous packages that were set up by Biden. But there is a new package that coming from Trump administration. Is that true?
It is true, yes. It's not a huge amount, but at least it is a sign that it might be maintained. I mean, the aid is going to be continued. But unfortunately, my personal perspective is that it is not for Ukraine. It is a signal for Russian Federation. If Russia is not going to be nice or
Cooperative.
Yep, cooperative, the aid, including military aid, would be much more substantial.
Colleagues, if we may, let's move into the update from the front line. We haven't broke down the situation on the front line for a very long time. What is the situation on the ground? Ruslan, if you can pull up for us map, and if we can go over all the critical points on that front line map.
Yeah, of course, I will try. It's very important question because the military situation in the front line is also changing. Sometimes ago, we were talking about that the nature and the time of the year will bring a significant changes in the battlefield because now we have a spring in Ukraine, and this spring also makes a better conditions to the new offensive operations.
As the soil is getting dry, trees are blooming, so it's harder for the drones to attack or hold attacks.
Yeah. We were talking about this, and now we are seeing the consequences of these changes, of this weather, of this calendar. And Russia started a few directions, offensive operations, and these offensive operations are very hard. Ukraine is recognizing, considering, and stating growing up of Russian attacks in 50% for the last 2 weeks, in comparing with the previous time. And we can see this map. Do you see it, map?
Yeah, we can see the map, but before we go into the southeast, if you can just say a few words about the Kursk region. That operation is fully done over. No more soldiers, Ukrainian soldiers, I mean, in the Kursk. They were fully pushed out. What is the situation there, and how do you think this whole front line will develop there? Like, would Russia now plan offensive attacks from Kursk into the Ukrainian territory, or they will just remain plateau and everybody's just going to stay on their line?
Now you can see the border line between Ukraine and Russia. I'm trying to mark it in red to see better. Sorry for my quality of my drawing. I'm trying to be my best. And this is a border line between the countries. And you can see this blue dots. It's a part which of Russian lands which is under the control of Ukrainian forces. Now it's near 15 square kilometers, but 6 months ago it was near 800 square kilometers. And of course, it shows us clearly that Russian forces moved out Ukrainian forces from the Kursk region, and Putin last week called the fully liberation of the Kursk region. It's also a very important political signal because it was one of the preliminary conditions to start negotiation with Ukraine, with the United States, is absence of Ukrainian forces on Russian territory. So it achieved, but Ukrainian side shows that we still are somewhere in the lands of Russia, but Ukraine is not controlling even one Russian settlement. At the same time, Russian forces go through this line to the neighboring Sumska Oblast of Ukraine and capture it. 4 settlements, small settlements, near 80 square kilometers of Ukrainian lands, and Ukrainian offensive operation on the Kursk region, in our eyes, becoming a semi-defensive operation for Ukrainian forces, because now Russian forces are trying to capture, to surround this regional center or in Ukrainian lands. I think the Sumy region will be one of the hottest plays in this war during this year, and Ukraine lost this political argument to use it in trade with Russia, like it was planned before this operation. But at the same time, we achieved the condition to start the peace negotiation, because if Ukrainian forces would stay in Russian lands, it means that Russian government would not be able to start negotiation process because of political informational losses in the eyes of Russian society.
So from one side, we can conclude it saying that from one perspective, it's good for the negotiations because that was one of the conditions that Russia was putting out there, that they're not going to start the negotiations before the Ukrainian soldiers are leaving the internationally recognized Russian territory. But from another perspective, the card that basically Ukrainians had to exchange Kursk region for something else is gone. They haven't used it in a timely manner, and they just lost that card that could have been played out in terms of the land exchange.
Yeah, absolutely.
And now the southeast side, there is a lot of fighting there, but it looks like the front line was stabilized there. Is there any critical points where Russian troops are advancing fast or making any maneuvers? And what is your projection in terms of that summertime that you've mentioned earlier, that now when the soil is going to get drier and it's easier for artillery, tanks, and other machinery to move and drive in certain areas, and as well as the drones would not be as effective, because usually the Ukrainian soldiers are using drones to stop certain moves from the Russian troops, are not going to be as effective because trees are blooming, trees are growing with leaves, and that will prevent from clear visibility how to destroy your enemy. So what is the current situation, and what is your prediction in terms of what will happen now during that summertime if Russians will continue and push with their offensive?
Now we have 3 dangerous direction of Russian offensive operation. We are talking about the left bank of River Oskil. You can see the Russian direction offensive operation. Russia is trying to cut Ukrainian Platsdarm on the left bank in 3 parts, and Russia almost achieved these goals. Russia is trying to occupy this left bank part of the Oskil and capture one of the regional center of Kharkiv Oblast, Borova, and also very important city Liman. It's a Donetsk Oblast, and come from the north to the very holy place Svetogorsk, and come from the north to the Slovensk Kramatorsk agglomeration. Also, the goal of Russia is also the city Kupiansk, which was so-called capital of Russian occupied territories of Kharkiv Oblast in 2022. This is very dangerous direction, and Ukraine may lose all these lands, I think, during the next months. Also, Russia is trying to make offensive operation in Konstantinovka direction. Konstantinovka, Drushkivka direction from three sides, from the Bakhmut, Chasov Yar, through the Toretsk, and from the south, from the location of Ocheretino and Kalinovo. Russia is also trying not only from north, but also from south to go to the Kramatorsk and Sloviansk, which now these cities are the biggest cities under Ukrainian control. We in Donetsk Oblast, in Donbas in generally, and these cities are still very good inhabited. And Sloviansk was a city, a very symbolic city for the Russian movement, because Sloviansk was captured by the Igor Strelkov in 2014, and their fighting between Ukraine and Russia for Donbas started from this operation around the Sloviansk, very important city. And also very dangerous direction we have on Pokrovsk direction, when Russian forces are trying to surround, to capture this city also from the east north and also from south north. Pokrovsk is very important big city, Pokrovsk Mirnograd agglomeration. Now it's destroyed a lot, unfortunately, but Russia is trying to capture these last cities of western Donbas and go to the border between the Donetsk and Dnipropetrovsk Oblast of Ukraine, to make symbolic steps on the Dnipropetrovsk lands, to show that Ukrainian army is losing this war. These directions, three directions, are the most dangerous now in this war, but it looks for me that all the sides are not trying to move now as fast as they can, because there is a negotiation process, and no one wants look in the eyes of Trump like enemy of a negotiation of enemy of peace building. So they are trying some kind to force military activities, but if this negotiation process will be stopped or frozen, I think we will see the new escalation of this war. Exactly.
Marina, I know that you're very familiar with the Donbas region. Ruslan and I, we give a lot of perspectives in terms of technical situation in Donbas region, what part is occupied, what part was elaborated, and just what is happening there from the technical perspective. I'm curious to ask you about the region as a whole from people perspective. Let's say Ukraine elaborates tomorrow and frees the entire Donbas region. In what way it will be possible for Ukraine to reintegrate those regions back, or people who've been living under shells and artillery for the past 11 years, I think, since 2014? What is the situation in terms of the society perspective there, in terms of the cultural perspective, and how the life of people that have stayed there looks like? I just want you to elaborate a little bit more on that perspective, because I think it's important for people that listen to us to understand that this is not just a map that is moving from left to right and somebody occupies more, somebody elaborates less or more, but there are still people that are living there. I'm just not sure what are the numbers, but it's probably hundreds of thousands of people that are still living in the region that is conflicted.
Yes, you're right. You're absolutely right. First of all, let me remind to all of us that my personal perspective that Ukraine internal or domestic politics towards Donbas, or towards, at the very beginning in 2014, towards Donbas people and humanitarian issues was absolutely a disaster. It was a disaster. That's why when we're talking about people now, they have to rely on themselves or on the members and organizations of international community. apart from the fact that people are under permanent shelling and they're living in unbelievably complicated conditions, those people are treated by their own government and their own country as sort of those who are waiting for Russians. Those people are not provided with any proper assistance from the government. And as I've mentioned before, a lot of those people were depending on international aid organizations like UN, People in Need, and a lot of others. At this stage, it's complicated for me to predict what kind of behavior we might expect from communities which are tired, which the majority of members of those communities are with the post-trauma syndrome, and we do understand that. But I believe that they are ready to accept any solution, any country, any citizenship, because they are too tired of war. That's the main conclusions I've made. I don't know if I answer your question, James.
Yeah, absolutely. Ruslan, is there anything else that we should add that we have missed during the topics that we have brought up that should be mentioned and are important right now to analyze and present?
We have a lot of topics, but I have a very huge rain outside now. I think you hear some noise. It's through the window even. And what can I say? You know, I discussed with my friends success or unsuccess of Trump's
peaceful
initiatives and Trump's approaches to the peace. But many people are saying that that Trump is unsuccessful in this situation. I don't think so, because now we are in the stage of the trade about the future of the peace. And we were just dreaming about this stage half a year ago, when even the talk half a year ago, 6 months ago, even the preliminary talk about the ceasefire or the balances between the sides led to some claims from the different types of political players from the different blocs and so on. So very important to understand. Of course, there is no lasting peace, and but we moved a lot on this direction during the last 3 months, and now we have a very concrete talk about the future conditions and balances of this peace, and it's a very important achievement during these 3 months, and maybe next 3 months will help us to find a real solution and real peace.
It's something that we can see at first sight because it's not very tangible, but we can clearly understand that the social, economical, and political perspective have shifted from not having discussions about peace into having discussions about the circumstance and the practical way how that peace deal will be signed. Marina, is there anything else that you think it's important to add into that?
No, I just totally agree with Ruslan. If we're talking about signals, the public discussions inside of Ukraine, where there are quite a strict rules, what you can or what you cannot say, those public discussions dedicated, yep, exactly. And I totally supportive of the idea and of the narratives that is success. During that period of time, almost 3 years, it was strictly prohibited even to think, I'm sorry to say that, about any peace deal. Now we're talking about that. So it is success. It is working. Totally
I agree with you. Colleagues, thank you so much for your time today. Thank you for the expert analysis and providing your comments and insights into what is happening and how it is forming and what are the potential future predictions. Guys, please subscribe to our channel. If there is anything that you would like us to discuss or you think it's important to mention, please let us know in the comments. Thank you again, and I'll see you back in the next episode with updates about the situation in Ukraine.
Thank you.
James.